you're reforming the task of deep research to just really focus on search, or if it's just about like scaling up the compute that's used to search. And so maybe even before we talk about Orbit, if I could just ask, how do you currently define a search agent?
Yeah, so it's a good question. So I feel like earlier when we started with last year, people started calling deep research as a term, but I feel like we got criticized at some places of calling deep research. I feel like what the users expect when they hear deep research is they expect a report generation based style, and deep research is not just necessarily answering web-based queries, but I feel like it's a more broad term, a more broad and umbrella term, meaning that you would want your LLM to think more, to to search through many tools to able to answer a question with more time and more probably more time test time compute. So that's what I would broadly define as deep research. I feel like this agentic search or search agents has a different definition. So I personally think these work with probably a search tool or a browse tool, and with that you are able to reach an answer for a particular question. So this would more be like, okay, you're browsing for information on the internet. So if provided you give a browser to your LLM, and let's say they have an access to a browser, would they be able to answer these web search style questions? So
Yeah, yeah. So I love that. And then so I guess like with yeah, and I think on the deep research, I love how the scope could be just any tool. Like if I ask the question of how did like say Cohere release a new embedding model and it's called V5, let's say, and I'm saying how does Cohere V5 perform on beer, and it's like it could use the tool of like running the evaluation tool you give it to do such a thing, and so it's like a bigger scope compared to like searching. Yeah,
yeah. Yeah, personally, I do think that's true. So for at least for our setup in the academic setup, I've realized that even using one tool, it's kind of your training becomes much more slower. It burns up a lot of tokens, and it burns up a lot of GPU hours. So I feel like at an industry level where you can afford to have multiple tools and multiple agents orchestrate within each other, I think of it as an ideal scenario where you will, like for example, if you want to figure out what is the latest Hugging Face model, embedding model which does well on, let's say, beer NF corpus as an example, so you can actually search through papers, or you can actually search through the Hugging Face search, and really learn that as a tool and figure out what's the best model out there. So yeah, I feel like at an ideal scenario, if the models are able to understand what tool they wish to interact and they have access to it, that would be pretty great. But for I think so for our own research setting, we tend to focus on just the search and the web browse as a tool. Yeah, in the paper, and I think so in my research directions as well.
yeah, I think it kind of reminds me of like the original rag paper from Patrick Lewis, where the setup is like a billion web documents. That's the corpus, and so it's like kind of that one massive corpus, and that's kind of been like the vision of vector data. Like that's like kind of the gold path, the happy path is if there are these collections that have tons of data, and then so, yeah, so then coming back to the search agent. So if you just have this one tool to search, and it's an extremely powerful tool, like and really open, and I think we're still really figuring out how far we can go with that tool.